Wow, what a panel.
Packed and stacked.
We're stacked.
And stacked. Yes. Welcome, Aubrey, by the way. How was, maybe you can take us on the Radfest, maybe a quick wrap up from that. That was amazing. I was only there for about a day and a half, but I had a great time. Got to see you in person as well. How'd they go?
Yeah. So before I answer that, let me just tell you, about 5 minutes ago, I sent you an email with an image in it that I very much would like to show everybody. But while you're finding it, let me answer the question.
Sounds great.
It was a real triumph. I must say, I've run a lot of conferences over the past 23 years or so, and this was one of the very best. Ultimately, the reason why it was so good was because of the juxtaposition of people with different mindsets, different backgrounds, different skill sets. That made all the difference. Radfest has always been somewhat like that. They started out very much from a tradition of not really having very much strength on the science side, just being really enthusiasts, people who had passion about longevity, but didn't really know how to go about it. And Radfest began with just a few of us, a few researchers coming in and trying to, raise the quality of understanding. Over the past 9 years, they started in 2016. That's gradually ramped up a bit, but this year they decided to go full force in that regard and partner with me to have me not just come in as a speaker, but to actually organize half the meeting. So I brought in at least a dozen, probably more than that, probably more like 20 speakers, covering all manner of different areas of the research. And it wasn't obvious that this would work. It wasn't clear that the people who were more Radfest culture would really appreciate it, but it was extraordinary. I couldn't walk down the corridor for more than like 10 yards without somebody new coming up to me, somebody who had never been to one of my conferences before, and saying how wonderful it was that this had happened. And it was the same the other way. Some of the speakers I had that I brought in were very mainstream, very much, people who are careful with their own reputations and who do not in any way want to associate with snake oil or anything like that. And they too were really, really enthusiastic about the structure and composition of the conference. So I'm sure we'll do it again and again. And I am really happy with how it went.
Yeah, I think it was amazing. I caught a few of the talks. I didn't go to many of the technical ones because I just know I'm not going to understand them. But I'm very happy that they were there, and I know a lot of people probably there who are researchers and really get into the science part of it. I'm more of a pedestrian tech guy into crypto, showing support there. But man, it had something for everyone there.
Well, so let me actually speak to that a little bit, because we had an idea. So what I did with my speakers this time, with maybe half of them anyway, is I split their talks in two. I had them give a very introductory 15 minutes or so on the main stage, talking to everyone, people who knew no biology at all. And then I had a rather deeper dive that happened in a breakout room the following day. That worked pretty well. But the new idea that we had right at the end of the meeting was that we should probably take that a step further and have a third, even deeper dive kind of session that would not be at the conference. It would be as a webinar, but it would be obviously associated with the conference. You would get free access to it if you were registered for the conference, things like that. So we're aggressively looking into that for next year.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, just even on the first day, it went really well to kick off with you speaking. I can't figure out the people's name. Sorry, what was the organizer's name? James, I want to say.
Yeah, Jim
yes.
Shaw.
And the co-author of the Chicken Soup book.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. It was really good. I really enjoyed the lineup. I think the show, the presentation of the ladies, and all that stuff too. It was really inspiring. I just want to tell you, it was like I was there. I was like, wow, this is why I kind of came here. I wanted to, feel that inspiration. I wanted to feel the passion, especially when you get up there on stage. You really brought it to. And the next day, even watching the film, The Immortalist. If you Google The Immortalist 2014 or Aubrey Gray with it, and you can see there's a documentary about this. And Aubrey, I just gotta say, I don't think you've aged a single day from the trailer picture on that.
I should emphasize that this movie, The Immortalists, is not the same movie as something called The Immortalists, plural, that also featured me and came out at least a decade ago. This one is, I think, only 3 years old, and it's all about crime.
Oh, okay. That's I got them mixed up then. Okay. Yes, listen to what he said on that one. And it's about cryonics. Okay, and then there's the other one about that features more of you. Okay, yeah, interesting story. Regardless, I'm not in the cryonics as much as the other parts and the maintenance and therapies and all that stuff too. But very interesting movie called at least the last half of that one. I do have the image. Do you want to bring it up here?
Sure. Yes, please. I mean, may as well talk about this while everyone's paying attention still. The big news that I have outside of the progress with Radfest and the progress with our first big study that we can talk about later is that, and especially this is relevant obviously to people who are into crypto, is that we have partnered with VitaDAO and Bio to launch a coin that is basically named after me. And it's going to launch in about 3 weeks from now on August the 6th. It is, you know how tokens work. Obviously, I don't have to explain that to you. But the idea is that it will raise actual fiat money that we can use to do our next study. These studies that we're doing, I firmly believe, are the single most important type of study that's being done in the entire field right now to hasten the defeat of aging, both by making scientific progress and by waking the world up to the fact that aging is actually quite a big problem and that we might be able to do something about it. So the sooner we get our next study going, which is going to take at least $5 or $6 million, the sooner we will start saving lives. And as such, this coin is going to play an enormous role in it. So I would urge everybody, please, to look out for this on August the 6th. I will be, of course, tweeting the living daylights out of it, and to get involved. That's all I wanted to say. I mean, you can read the slide, I hope. It's all about a new coin, and of course, we will make it accessible in every way possible.
Make aging stop again. Yay.
That's the idea.
More. Yeah. Awesome.
Bridge them to PulseChain, please, sir.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as you know, my history with Richard goes back through to 15 or more years ago when he was unknown and volunteered at one of my conferences. And of course, when he got in touch with me in 2021 to do the airdrop for PulseChain, that was huge. Bad things happened thereafter, but here I am. I seem to have withstood that, and things are a lot better now.
You can tell the technical people here. First comment: Bridge to PulseChain. Launch it on PulseChain. We need PulseChain. Yes.
Yep, totally. I mean, that is critical. We obviously very, very much appreciate the fact that we have a lot of support across the entire crypto community, but that our support within the Richard Hart ecosystem, let me call it that, just in broad terms, is second to none. So we will be doing absolutely everything we can to make sure that happens.
Amazing. Cool. Well, I'm going to step off here. We'll do, Aubrey, do you have anything you wanted to talk about in general or present, or should just do Q&A? How would you like to do it?
I'm happy with just Q&A. I mean, basically the stuff I would like to present in terms of any monologue is the kind of stuff that you can all look at on YouTube in one of my recent presentations anyway. So I think a better use of the time would be to just stick with Q&A.
Sounds great. All right, Captain RG3 is here, by the way. He's gonna come back a little bit later in the day too, as well, to talk Hex versus Bitcoin. Right now, talk longevity. SJ, Twinkie, Daniel, live first and fast. Take it away, everyone.
All right, I got a question. Aubrey, Twinkie, or Isaac, whichever is convenient for you. Pleasure to make your acquaintance. So I know recently, I think it was the German National Academy of Sciences, Leopoldina, I believe it was, published a paper in their discussion series. I don't know if you've come across it in your travels. Long story short, for maybe the viewers who are not familiar with it, it was largely you've been waving the banner for a number of years, treating aging as a disease and starting to divert some more funding to it primarily on a more national level to solve some of the challenges that we are all imminently facing with population decline and overall health. So any early feedback, commentary on that, if you are not familiar with it, and how that perhaps aligns to the message you've been touting for quite some time?
Yeah, so my familiarity with it is not as great as it should be, largely because I've been running my own annual conference, as Max mentioned, and really leading up to that. So it's high on my list to read through the fine print of what they published. But I certainly have heard about it, and it is undoubtedly a big deal. It has the chance to make quite a difference to the extent to which public funding in Germany comes into longevity research. Exactly how that would happen, depends on how other people react, in particular how policymakers react. We've had many cases over the years when things like this happen, when well-respected scientists or scientific groups say something quite progressive in this regard, and then the people who actually write checks completely ignore it. So there will be work to do to make sure that doesn't happen. But for sure, this is the kind of first step that we really need.
And secondary follow-up question that would be, obviously public funding has been a challenge. There have been different private actors who I think have demonstrated that they are fairly benevolent when it comes to this topic. I know myself, I've had my dog Storm, German Shepherd, you might see him running around in the background, enrolled since inception in the dog aging project here in North America. So to what extent have you and some of your colleagues explored the notion of, okay, look, maybe for a logical argument, or treating human aging as a disease is a bridge too far, but people love their pets. So wouldn't you want to have the best treatments possible and the most opportunities possible to keep your furry friend around for as long as possible? I know they're experimenting with rapamycin and some other drugs, which I'm familiar with your thoughts on that. But to what extent have you explored perhaps some of those avenues?
Sure. So Matt Capeline, who runs the Dog Aging Project, is a great friend of mine. He actually spoke at Radfest a couple of days ago. And, I think the Dog Aging Project is completely awesome, even though it is mainly focused on things that won't really scale to humans. Simply because, as you say, the more progress we make in animals that people really care about, as opposed to mice, which very few people care about, the more we may change the kind of psyche in society in this regard. Of course, there's a number of countervailing arguments. The first one is that these are studies done in the community. By definition, they are dogs that are owned by people in the community. They're not done in a controlled environment, and that somewhat reduces the amount that one can learn from these studies. The other bigger problem is that dogs live a lot longer than mice. Even big dogs that live less long than small dogs, they still live a lot longer than mice, and so it takes a longer time to get a result. And unfortunately, we do have, a really strong entrenched desperation in society not to believe that medicine will ever be able to do anything about aging. This arises, of course, from the fact that, people just don't want to get their hopes up, and they have to put it out of their minds. And so one has to measure lifespan. If one measure various metrics of health, then that's great. People want, that want to be healthy for longer, and they want to be, and if you see an animal being healthy for longer, that's evidence. But if you don't measure lifespan, then people will always, almost in a Pavlovian way, they will default to the assumption that actually you're not doing anything about lifespan, that these animals may be living healthy longer, but they will keel over on schedule. And that will be translated into a belief that we haven't actually done anything about aging, and therefore that there is some kind of glass ceiling on how much we can extend health span. So we have to look at lifespan. That's why I'm still working on mice.
What about when you start to talk about the DAO and things on chain? Is there a way with your research, involving humans, that you could incorporate the blockchain for data management, for people to be able to do something like send in quality health data about themselves for study perhaps in return for tokens,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it'd be monetized in some way.
Yeah,
And then
very.
be governed by smart contracts for security, for safety, much stronger than traditional systems.
Yeah, very important idea. So this is not something that we ourselves are doing, but let me take that opportunity, the opportunity you've given me, to promote a company named Rejuve.ai, which is doing pretty much exactly what you said. The idea here is to bring together N of 1 experiments. We've got a rapidly increasing number of biohackers in the community, including particularly biohackers who care about their longevity. And they are getting more and more useful in a very important way, namely they're getting more and more educated about how to capture the right data, good baseline data, for example, from before they start doing this or that intervention. And what's missing is that everyone's different. Everyone's got their own other supplements they're taking or whatever, their own health data. So it's very difficult to extract information from aggregations of such studies that compares in value to what you would get from a randomized controlled clinical trial. But it's not impossible. And the fundamental way to do it is to bring things together in a standardized way, to throw machine learning at these things. And that's what Rejuve.ai is seeking to develop, to maximize the amount of information we can extract from what I'm calling N of 1 experiments.
Very cool.
Can I jump in here for a second? Or you got another follow-up? You good, Fast? Right on. Hey, Aubrey. Hey, thanks for coming out last year and speaking at our event in New York. I appreciated that. That was nice of you to come and spend time with us.
I'm looking forward to this time.
Yeah. We'll get you out the next time. I've got two questions. Other than say, experimental therapies and advanced therapies that you guys are working on, and the whole kind of longevity world's working on. When we're talking about the things that we, as the normies out here can do, I've deduced that sleep, diet, and exercise are the most important things that we can kind of do on our own, other than these therapies and whatnot. In your opinion, or do you have protocols or things that you point to work on those three items for those of us who are out here just trying to get our lifestyles in check?
Yeah, no, I don't. However, a lot of my colleagues do. Some of them very high-profile colleagues, like Brian Johnson, of course. I'm very much a PhD rather than an MD, so I don't seek to identify recommendations for people. However, let me say one very important thing. Every single person is different. Therefore, anybody who tells you, whether on stage or in a book or anything, that everybody should do such and such a thing, so to do X, like, for example, sleep exactly 7.5 hours every night, things like that, don't believe them. What you need to believe is that the only thing that really works is to pay attention to your own body. You are your best physician. Now, of course, a lot of that means measurement of stuff. And since I just kind of picked on Brian Johnson, let me counteract that by saying that one thing that Brian Johnson is doing really, really well and valuably is that he is really highlighting the imperative value of as much measurement as you can possibly do. The more you know about what your body's doing, the better. But of course, it's not just knowing things by, submitting to machines, like, whole body MRI and things like that. It's also knowing your body by listening to it, by determining what makes you feel groggy when you wake up in the morning and what doesn't, things like that. And so, I'm, for example, I very much think sleep is important, but not at the level of ensuring that every single night is the same. If I have a couple of hours too little sleep one day, but I catch up the following day, I am absolutely fine. Whereas some people might not be. And so it's, same with exercise. I don't do any exercise and nothing seems to happen. But a lot of other people need exercise in order to maintain a sensible body weight, things like that. It's very, very personal.
Gotcha. No, that's perfect. You answered my question. My son does a lot of research and work with Brian Johnson's son. They're actually in cahoots with each other with some stuff. So I was going to ask you if his protocols were something that you leaned into, and that's great to know. So awesome, thanks. And I guess the follow up question on that is now into the more experimental things and stuff that's going on out there. Would you give me your opinion on the peptide world and what the peptides are doing for folks, and whether or not you guys are doing any research on that?
So we're not. I'll be straight. It's a very controversial area. And a large part of why it's controversial is because it, for decades and decades, has had a very bad rap. It got that way because peptides were, the interest in peptides for longevity was first, it originated in Russia, well, in the Soviet Union, especially in the lab of a now retired gerontologist named Vladimir Kavinson, who was based in St. Petersburg. It was called Leningrad back then. People really, were doubtful about the quality of the studies. And of course, what's supposed to happen in circumstances like that is replication. People, are supposed to do it again and see what happens. And well, the difficulty we have here is that when people do experiments and they get negative results, they often don't publish them. And so we honestly don't know. But the gut feeling that exists in the expert community is that peptides don't really work. That, for example, the original one, the kind of poster child of peptide medicine, a thing called epitelon, which is a 4 amino acid peptide, people just feel it doesn't work. And it doesn't have much benefit. Now, I would love for there to be a really systematic, well-funded study on peptide medicines, so on a variety of them, just to answer this question once and for all. Nobody is throwing money at that, and it's definitely something that I believe should be done. Perhaps the incentive to do that is greater now than it ever was, simply because there's a lot more chat in the wider community, in the wider world, about peptides than there was even 10 years ago. But I don't know how to make that happen.
There is monster, amounts of groups of people that are doing peptides now. I mean, it's all over the place. And I was just wondering what your take was on it. And last thing, since there's a few of us in here, your take on nicotine and cigar smoking, if you've got an opinion.
Well, I see that there's someone here who probably has an opinion on that. Well, I mean, obviously, my first wife died last year at 79. And she was very, very healthy. She did really, really well to get to 79 because she smoked a pack a day of non-filter Camels every day since she was 14. So, quite remarkable that she lasted as long as she did. Fact is, smoking is definitely bad for you. Now, of course, cigars, don't necessarily inhale. That may be a bit different, maybe a bit less bad for you. But the fact is, the correlation between smoking cigarettes and lung cancer is unquestionable.
Any opinion on the nicotine now that everybody's talking about benefits of nicotine?
Yeah, so it's complicated. I mean, of course, the things that are supposed to be bad for you in cigarettes, there are many possibilities. And I have not actually been keeping up to date with the studies on nicotine on its own. But of course, there's a lot of people using nicotine patches and such like to help them give up smoking. So that's a study, that's an observational study that should be possible now.
Okay, thanks, Aubrey.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I got 2 questions since we're on the smoking topic. Let's keep it there. Are there any benefits of marijuana for longevity?
Yeah, that one comes up a lot. The real difficulty with so many of these things is that the benefits or detriments that need to be considered fall into the purely biochemical category, the direct impact, and the psychological category. There's no question at all that stress is bad for you. Now, when I say stress, let me be clear, I mean susceptibility to stressful situations. If you have objectively a stressful life, but you're just really good at handling stress, that's not what I'm talking about. So anyone who gets stressed, their stress hormones, cortisol and so on, are going up. We know a whole bunch of ways in which that's really bad for you, accelerates various aspects of aging. Therefore, anything that lowers your stress is going to be good for you inherently. It's just that it may be bad for you in other ways, right? Of course, different people have very different ways of reducing their stress, right? Some people, it's all meditation. Some people, it's, what I do is I stare at the sky from my hot tub quite a lot. That's really good for me, the tranquility and everything. A lot of people have different things, and marijuana certainly, for some people has that impact. Psychedelics, likewise. So, that's why it's very, very hard to disentangle.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And the psychedelics part is huge, right? Like any stress we could relieve off the brain and off the gut with the stress is huge. And my second question, I know you say you don't want to like blanket make statements on what's good for one or another,
right?
But how important is it for people to reset using a 3-day fast or something like that?
Right. So this is still something that I think we need more data on, but we know very well from work going back literally 100 years that eating less than you would like extends your life. The difficulty is that it extends your life less if you're already a long-lived organism like a human being than what it does if you're a mouse. It also extends life less if you start doing it later in life relative to starting in adolescence. Now, the thing so this has been known, as I say, for decades and decades. What's new over the past 20 years is really two things. First of all, the discovery of what are called calorie restriction mimetics. So these are drugs that trick the body into thinking it's in a famine, basically activate the same pathways that were normally activated by actual famine, right? And therefore has more or less the same effects. Usually not quite as powerful, but sometimes close. So those are useful because, of course, people like eating, and therefore, if you can do this, then you get the best of both worlds up to a point. Then the other thing is what you said, different schedules of famine. The classical way in which this kind of thing was done in mice and in other organisms in the lab was just to reduce the amount of food in a uniform way. But a few people, I think the most prominent one is definitely Walter Longo at University of Southern California, that explored the idea of what's now called intermittent fasting. And exactly how you do it depends. 1 meal a day, OMAD as it's often called, is one kind of intermittent fasting. So is, as you say, fasting for a couple of days at a time, things like that. Now, why do these things work at all? Well, of course, there are multiple mechanisms, but it's really all about having periods when your blood sugar and therefore your insulin is really, really low. And, that seems to be very good for you. But let me say, again, long-lived species don't benefit very much in terms of lifespan. So the good for you part is really all about health. It's all about making you more robust. And there may be some downsides. People who do really hardcore calorie restriction in whatever way, they don't weigh much. And they tend to be, less cold tolerant. And they, their immune systems generally are better, which is good, but there are reasons why that's a little fragile. So yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons, but the main thing is the best case scenario is you might live an extra couple of years. And that's definitely better than nothing, but it sure as hell isn't the Holy Grail. And that's why I'm working on things that have the potential to do a very great deal better.
I appreciate that, man. And I appreciate you and the input you have. And I myself, I do 3-day fasts once a month, and I always use electrolytes and water and make sure I rest well. And I also put other stresses at the same time. So I take cold showers, right? Like cold plunges and things like that. So my temperature regulation is very different than most. Like I don't sweat in the summertime. I have a way better tolerance to the cold. And I think like these things together, like you said, like if we implement not just one, but multiple things at the same time, I think that's great. And thank you for just being here to educate people. It's very amazing to see somebody take the time not only to figure out the information, but to pass it to other people. And I hope people listen to this conversation, because this is probably like the better panels on this conference, in my opinion.
Hey, Aubrey. Thanks for being here. I have a question for you. I was really excited to see you partnering with VitaDAO. I met Laura, who I believe was involved a couple years ago at one of the longevity conferences. And my question is women specific, actually. Do you feel like there are any specific like interventions or research gaps for like, you know, when it comes to like feminine longevity? Because we age differently, right? Like significant events like menopause and things like that cause us to age differently.
Okay, so I could spend half an hour talking about this, but a short answer: the situation in relation to women's longevity has improved beyond recognition over the past decade. A lot of it was led by Nicole Shanahan, who got into this field, partly because she was interested anyway, partly because she had resources. And then she had a lot more resources because she got married to Sergey Brin, and then she got divorced from Sergey Brin, but she's still interested in the field. So anyway, long and short of it was, a lot of money went to the Buck Institute, and they were able to use it to bring in some extremely world-class researchers into this area, notably Jennifer Garrison. So a bunch of progress has been made there. But also in the private sector, a number of groups have started to focus on this. There is a widespread recognition that there's a big demand, for delaying menopause, but also other stuff, figuring out better versions of hormone replacement therapy, you name it. So yeah, there's a lot going on. It's not an area that we're working in our mice, but it's definitely far better than it was a decade ago.
Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Hey, Daniel, no
Daniel,
mic.
If you're talking, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
No.
Something's not working.
Yeah, he's trying to speak and we can't hear him.
Maybe this is better.
There you go.
Yes.
Now we got you.
Yeah, sorry about that. All right. I can see we have some questions in the comment as well, so let's take those first. John Smith asked Aubrey, what do you think about using hypnosis to slow or reverse the aging process?
Well, I guess it's a lot of that depends on what happens when you're in your trance, right? What you are induced to do, especially what you're induced to do after you wake up. This is not an area that I feel I know anything about, to be honest. But I can certainly imagine that there would be ways to use hypnosis in the ways I was mentioning earlier to induce long-term reduction in stress, which would definitely be beneficial. That's really all I can say on the matter.
Sure. All good. And again, thank you for taking the time for this. Fox Mulder asked, have you heard of using vibration to kill cancer cells?
I've heard of it. I haven't studied the work on this in great detail. However, what I do know is that over the years, over many, many, many years, there have been innumerable attempts to use novel approaches to kill cancer cells, and they have had only very limited benefits. Essentially, the difficulty with cancer is that uniquely among all the things that go wrong with us late in life, cancer has natural selection on its side. So you do something, you might kill off most of the cells in a tumor. That's definitely good. But the ones you don't kill off will promptly regrow. And you end up back where you started really rather quickly. So the thing one needs in really effective anti-cancer therapy is something that somehow transcends that really, really ensures that none of the cancer cells can survive and reproliferate. There are lots of attempts right now, which are definitely succeeding and making progress, to improve the ability of the immune system to attack cancer. A lot of these things are quite ingenious, and they are definitely working increasingly well year on year. So that's great. The one thing that I have always focused on with regard to cancer is the telomere. as everybody here knows, I'm quite sure, the thing about cell division is that when cell divides, it has to replicate its DNA, and the ends of the chromosomes get shorter. That's what's called the telomere. And the only reason that any cancer ever gets more than like a millimeter across is because it figured out a way to counter that by re-extending telomeres using an enzyme, well, in 90% of cases, using an enzyme called telomerase. So I put forward a ridiculously ambitious approach to addressing this 20 odd years ago, which honestly a lot of people thought was just impractical, and maybe it is. But now we have a kind of improvement on my idea, which involves a pretty miraculous drug that essentially kills off cells, quickly kills cells that are expressing high levels of telomerase. It's a drug called, well, it's normally just called thio. The real name is 6-hydroxydeoxyguanosine. But the fact is, it's already moved into clinical trials in Australia. These clinical trials are expanding. People are being treated. And, it remains to be seen, of course. A clinical trial is an experiment. We don't know what the result is going to be. But I am very gung-ho about this. I believe that it is the single most promising pan-cancer therapy that anyone is exploring at this point. So I thought I would plug it a little bit.
Nice. And one last one I think I can see here is Atlantean. Any thoughts on methylene blue?
Right. So this is something that needs more study. The main studies that got people's attention on methylene blue were at least a decade ago. And I'm actually quite surprised that there hasn't been further work. This is the kind of thing that always gets me a little bit worried, that maybe there was further work and it didn't reproduce the earlier work, and therefore people just have got bored, but they didn't publish the negative results. However, of course, a lot of times it's just not people's priority. There's not any actual negative results. So it's definitely something that I would like to see more study on.
Nice. And my own question is just simply, I know you say like it's different from body to body, but it will be interesting to hear, like, are there a practice that you do in your own life that you will say that is essential that you practice when it comes to longevity?
So this comes back to what I was saying earlier about, you are your own best physician. So, but so long as you get good measurements. So I spend a fair bit of money making sure that I do get really good measurements of things that might be going wrong with me. But luckily, the way I always come out is basically nothing's going wrong with me. I'm much younger than my chronological age. And so, it's more a case of playing a waiting game. Of course, the better you're doing relative to the average person of your own age, the more conservative it makes sense to be. If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. So I do almost nothing. The only thing I actually do that would count as any kind of intervention is I do take methylcobalamin, methylated B12. And that's because I have a genetic variant that predisposes me to a high homocysteine. This is the standard way to fix that. But I only know that I have that genetic variant because I got my genome sequenced, right?
And there's something you measure in particular that you will maybe say is essential, but most people overlook?
Not one thing, no. However, I should probably emphasize where we stand in terms of which combinations of things are most reliable. So right now, there's a huge interest in these things called epigenetic clocks, which I guess most of you know what that is, measuring the rate of change of the status of these decorations on our DNA that determine which genes are expressed and so on. And there are kind of closely related things like transcriptomic clocks, proteomic clocks. These are very much making progress, but my personal view has been for a long time that they've got a long way to go, well, a little way to go anyway, to overtake the more traditional things that one might measure in terms of function, whether it's cognitive function like memory, or whether it's physical function like grip strength or gait speed, the kinds of things, or indeed metabolic things like glucose tolerance. So I was very intrigued a week or two ago when, at a conference I was speaking at in Dublin, which was the latest in a line of conferences that I used to organize, there were a couple of talks describing the development of a new clock that is based on these things. Now, the reason one can do such a thing is because, unlike epigenetic or other omic data, people have been measuring things like grip strength and memory and so on for a very long time, and there are lots of genuinely, high quality longitudinal data sets that can be accessed in order to train a clock that's based on these clinical measures. So that's what these people did, and sure enough, they were able to come out with a clock that outperforms all of the omic clocks. So this kind of tells me that the right thing to do is the traditional measurements. Of course, depending on your budget, that may determine exactly how thoroughly you can do them. But still, these things really seem to be good predictors of not only how long you're going to live, but how long it's going to be before you start coming down with this or that chronic condition of late life.
Thank you.
Awesome. I've been listening in, taking a little break, listening in though. Amazing conversation.
I think
I got one parting question for Aubrey. So, Aubrey, with respect to current state in 2025, we're seeing things like blockchain advancing, democratization and power to the people in terms of finance, ownership of our personal data, private health information. Potentially, I as an individual can further commercialize my own health data. With all the advances you've seen in a multitude of technical fronts and medical fronts, any updated projections for when we can anticipate hitting LEV? So
my current prediction is that we have a 50% chance of reaching longevity escape velocity before the end of the 2030s. So within, let's say, 12 to 15 years. Now, of course, I can't say how soon we are certain to reach that because it's research, we don't know. But 50% chance is quite enough to be worth fighting for. And a lot of the reason why my timeframes in terms of how soon we're going to get there have not slipped for a long time now is because of technical stuff, whether it's improvements in AI, whether it's improvements in enthusiasm on the part of geeks, which of course is very much the crypto community who have contributed enormously, but also simply the rate of progress that's actually been made. So one thing I'd like to highlight, because it's very much related to our own work at LEV Foundation, is that when we started the first study 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we designed it 3 years ago, we were looking for interventions which had already been shown by someone or other to extend mouse lifespan, even when initiated relatively late in life, like in middle age. And there were very few of them. There were like 4. And so we put those 4 together in our experiment, and we got what we were hoping to get. We got additive benefits. But the total benefit, even for all 4 of them, wasn't as much as we want. So we want to do another experiment, and we want to do it with a lot more interventions. We want to use like 8 this coming time. So you may ask, well, how can we do that? The reason we can is because during the past couple of years, while our first study was ongoing, there have been more and more reports of things that individually work a little bit in mice, starting late in life. So, it gives us huge encouragement. In fact, we're now spoiled for choice. We could do 2 8 intervention studies in parallel with different interventions. And we still would be only using things which individually have already been shown to give some impact on lifespan. So that's really, really, really encouraging. It's a huge part of the reason why I believe we're really getting closer to longevity escape velocity.
Thank you.
Aubrey, so many people in the community, I believe, just think that you are just a hero and super appreciate everything for the years and years and many years to come of all the research, all the experiments, all the stuff you've been putting together through the organizations. And I feel like every other time we come on the show, I'm like, what happened to a lot of people in crypto get rich? They have an affinity for this longevity stuff and get much more funding, do much more stuff and make this huge impact in the real world. Like, what better else thing is there to do?
Well, thank you so much. And we honestly don't need very much. The first study cost $3.5 million. The second study, because it's going to be twice as many interventions, it's going to cost like $5 or $6 million because we had a bit of cost saving. I want to do maybe, I think it would probably take only 3 or so more of those studies, each coming in at that kind of price tag, before we have an 80% chance of getting to what I've called robust mass rejuvenation. So at the moment, if you take mice that are already in middle age, the best that you can do to how much you can extend their life is by 4 months. Essentially, they would normally live another year. You can extend that to 16 months. I want to treble that effect size. I want to get these mice to live 12 months longer than they normally would. In other words, 2 years starting from when the experiment begins rather than only 1 year. Trebling the effect size is the thing that will completely change every expert's view of the malleability of aging. I confirmed this on stage at Radfest just yesterday in the closing panel with 4 of my very prominent colleagues who spend a lot of time interfacing with the general public, same as I do. So I know that this is true. And it's only $20 million to do 3 more of these studies. It's pathetically little, and I can't get it. So if anyone in the crypto community can change that, then you will be the one who's saving lives.
Well, we're certainly going to try our hardest to get a whole bunch of money in this bull run. Let's do it. Let's go. And you can fund whatever you want. You can stay on the beach. You can do nothing with it, or you can find longevity research too. There are options out there for everyone. Oh, Aubrey DeGray, amazing panel. Thank you again for coming. Always love to have you on the show, at the conferences, everyone on the panel. You guys did amazing.
And do show that one slide that I gave you, multiple times during the meeting. If you want to promote this, that's the first thing that I want people to help with.
I'll pull it up right here too, just so we can run this. What we started with the Vita DAO. You pronounce it?
Yep. Everyone screen capture it. Whatever, spread it around. We want the day it launches 3 weeks from now. We want this to explode.